Hello everyone and welcome to Game 4 of the New In Chess Classic Finals Knockouts. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Hikaru Nakamura, and if you've been following the coverage so far, Magnus retaliated because Hikaru won the first game, second game ended in a draw, and then Magnus bounced back in the third one. And since Hikaru lost the first match, now Hikaru needs a win in the final game to force tiebreaks. Or if Magnus gets a draw or he gets a win in this game, then it's all over. So let's see what happens here. Magnus has the white pieces and he opens with e4. So let's see how Hikaru deals with Carlsen's e4. Hikaru goes for c5. He goes for the Sicilian defense. And we have c3 for Magnus, the Alapin variation of the Sicilian. So trying to throw Hikaru off guard, we have g6 and now d4. Striking in the center, we have captures, and now d5 by Hikaru. We have e5, grabbing more space in the center, and bishop to g7 now. We have knight to f3, and now comes knight to h6. This is how Hikaru decides to develop this knight. We have bishop to b5 with check, and now comes knight to c6. We have castles by both players, so castles, and h3 by Magnus, stopping bishop to g4. And here Hikaru goes for f6, and this is the crucial idea here. When playing this with black, you want to attack a white strong center, even at the cost of pushing your f6 pawn. So here Magnus captures, we have captures, and the knight to c3. Carlsen continues development. We have g5 and now rook to e1. And here there is a game where g4 was played, and I think this is in fact the strongest move in the position. But Hikaru decides against it. He goes for queen to d6. He doesn't want to overpush it and burn all of his bridges a bit too soon, so he decides to wait with the g4 idea. So queen to d6, this is now a new move in the position. So already as of move 12 we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus deals with it. He goes bishop to a4. Now with Hikaru's pawns being so weirdly placed here, he might be having some ideas of bishop to c2, queen d3, and maybe just going after this h7 pawn. For the moment this is not possible. As long as this knight is on h6, you always have this defensive resource of bishop to f5 attacking this queen. So for the moment, this is not a problem. King to h8 by Hikaru, and now comes bishop to b3 first, putting more pressure to the d5 pawn. Knight to e7 defending, and now queen to e2, adding another attacker here. Knight h to g8, that's why the king was pushed to h8, but also to get away from this diagonal. And now queen to b5. Magnus adds a third attacker to the d5 pawn, and Hikaru needs to defend it. We have rook to d8, and now comes bishop to d2. Now that all of his pieces are joining in the attack, Magnus needs to bring one more last piece into the game, and that's this rook on a1. So here b6, Hikaru is ready to develop the light square bishop, and now knight to e2. This knight can now come to g3, and from g3 to f5 and h5, depending on what black plays. So here a5 by Hikaru, and bishop to c2 now by Magnus. Again, there's always this idea of queen to d3, but as long as this bishop is here on c8, bishop to f5 will be possible because the knight covers this square. So here Hikaru just attacks the queen, bishop to a6, now queen to d3 is not possible, and now queen back to b3. We have rook d to c8 and rook 8 to c1. So the rook is in the game finally, and the situation on the clock is Magnus some 7 minutes and Hikaru 10 minutes on the clock. So let's see how Hikaru continues. We have rook to c6, preparing to double up on the c file, and bishop back to b1. Magnus very happy to trade here. We have rook 8 to c8, and now a trade on c6. We have captures, and now knight to c3. You could go to g3 like we said, then the knight can come to these squares, but Magnus prefers the more solid knight to c3. We have bishop back to c8. This bishop has to get activated somehow, so Hikaru switches it over to continue attacking the king side. And again, g4 or maybe f5 and g4, or maybe even h5 and g4 might be ideas in the future. So Magnus goes bishop to d3, now preparing queen c2 to put more pressure on h7, and now queen to d8. We have queen to c2 by Magnus, and now as the h7 pawn is under attack, just h6. This is how Hikaru defends it. And now queen to d1. You don't really want your queen on c2. So here bishop to e6, and now queen to e2. Now the queen is very active on the e file along with the rook. So now bishop back to f7 and now knight to b5. We have knight to g6 by Hikaru and now queen back to d1. Now Magnus wants to bring the queen over to b1 and then with this bishop battery put more pressure on the king side here. We have knight 8 to e7 and now queen to b1 as planned, and this is a super paralyzing move. Because this knight now cannot move because we just win material here, and it's not easy for Hikaru to find the move. He goes queen to d7, and now comes b4. Magnus wants to open up the queen side, the queen side here. We have a captures, bishop captures, and now h5. Hikaru now probably ready to push g4 here. We have knight back to c3 by Magnus, now shifting the knight back to g3 to help out with the defense. But now, not g4 right away. If you push g4 right away, then the knight comes here, and then it's just really, really bad because, well, this knight cannot move. Otherwise, the e7 knight becomes super weak, and other than that, it's just a incredibly difficult position to play for black. So instead, after knight to c3, we have rook to c7 by Hikaru, and now comes knight to e2. And now Magnus really wants to bring this knight over to g3. So instead of g4, Hikaru plays h4 and takes away the g3 square from Magnus's knight. And now, while Magnus could go for some knight h2 to g4 action, he decides to just straight out win the b6 pawn. So bishop captures on knight on e7, knight captures, and queen captures on b6. And now Magnus is very happy, not only with his position in this game, but also with his general position in the match, because, well, he's up a pawn, and he's ready to push his past a pawn to victory. And if Hikaru doesn't do anything about that, well, it's just a much better position for white. Hikaru does have the bishop pair, but it's, well, most definitely not fully operational. So bishop to h5 by Hikaru, now ready to pick up this knight to open up white's king side, but now knight to h2. Magnus doesn't even want to try anything here. You could allow, for example, white to capture this, but black to capture this, but there's really no point. And now queen captures is impossible because the rook is hanging. So maybe it is playable, but there's no reason to allow black any such chances. So knight to h2, and now Hikaru continues with f5. Now hopefully g4 is coming, and now we have queen to b5. Magnus now offers, bishop to b5, attacking the queen here. So the queen has to keep an eye on the rook on c7. So queen to c8, and here he just allows Magnus a bit too much. Here, safest was just rook to b7 to trade queens here, but it doesn't really help you. After captures and captures, white is still up a pawn, and even though black will probably not lose this, black will most definitely not win this. So Hikaru has to look for his chances elsewhere. When after bishop to b5, we have queen to c8, but now we have queen to d6 by Magnus. And now, again, it's very, very difficult to find a move here for black. Hikaru is up on time. Magnus has some 4 minutes on the clock, whereas Hikaru has 7. Again, it's not easy to find the moves here. So knight to g8. Once this knight moves, then there's going to be a nice attack here on this knight. So knight back to g8, and now knight to f3. Now Magnus says, okay, either you capture this knight, or then I'm just gonna play it anywhere and then just have a, you know, beautifully winning position. So Hikaru grabs it, but it's of little importance. We have g captures on f3, and now knight to f6 by Hikaru, but now Magnus just pushes a4. And now there's really not all that much for black to do here. Your last attempt is to once again play g4 here. This is basically the Hikaru's entire plan for the entire game, but he never got to push g4. So here he played rook to a7. Magnus offered a draw, or maybe Hikaru offered a draw and then Magnus accepted. I don't really know. But doesn't really matter, because here the game ended in a draw because Hikaru wasn't interested in continuing it. He knows that it's a losing position for black, and the Magnus, of course, very happily accepted it because he doesn't gain anything by winning, and by drawing it he wins the entire match. So here the game ended in a draw, and the Magnus is the winner of the New In Chess Classic, which goes a long way, as he's been really struggling to get a nice victory in a strong tournament, you know, ever since he turned 30. But yeah, here you resign, you don't resign, but your position is worse and there's really not all that much to play with. For example, if rook to c1, just attacking the queen, you can move the queen, let's say queen to f8, now queen e5, and now this is under attack. You can't really do anything about that. If you move the knight, then this falls. If you push it, then this falls. There's really there's no move here for black, and that's I mean that's just it. You have to play something like knight g8, then the d pawn falls. Then you have the passed d pawn and also the passed a pawn. So black really has nothing to hope for here. Of course, Hikaru knows that, and after rook to a7, he resigned the game. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and this very short coverage of the Noon Chess Classic. Like I said, I tried to move as quickly as possible to cover as many games as possible, but in the end I was only able to cover the finals. But now that this is over, I'm gonna try to improve everything as much as possible to get the room to have as little echo as possible. I've seen you guys in the comments, you gave some very nice suggestions, so I'm gonna go through all of that. And I already have some ideas, but you know, I've seen some of you guys are really into that and that you really know what you're talking about, so that will definitely come in handy. And also I will, you know, improve the background over time, so you know, more things are coming, don't worry not. And Meadows' old stuff is also coming. I had it dry cleaned, but it's still not ready. They said that they will have it next week, so no worries. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for being so patient and for, you know, all of your great suggestions in the comments. I would like to thank Colin Lancaster, Dustin Lackey, Rob Toy, Tom Derilau, and Ricardo Roffles for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.